Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome back from lunch. Hope everyone's had enough sugar and carbs to keep them going for the afternoon. I wear a couple of hats. The note there says I'm work at the Insurance Fraud Bureau. I'm the Chief Customer Officer. For those of you that heard Chief Customs, I'm not here for tax and revenue. The MIB is probably well known for a lot of the work it does in managing uninsured driving, but we also do a lot of work to manage a white labelled service for a number of client companies and also a number of databases and services for the general insurance market. So data technology and customer is something close to my heart, so I'm hoping it's going to be a really good panel this afternoon. Just going to start by introducing the panel. David, do you want to introduce yourself and then pass on?
Sure. Hello everybody, my name is Dave Priestley. I'm the Chief Digital Officer for Vitality Group in the UK. I imagine most people are probably aware of Vitality as a brand. For my kind of history there is really, I joined Vitality when in its previous iteration, when it was launched as a business back in 2004. It was called Pru Health at the time, and I think I was employee number 3 or 4, part of a little project group that founded the business, and obviously we've now built that up through health insurance, life insurance. We've got an investment business now, and most recently launched a car insurance business as well. And I guess just the kind of key differentiator, if you like, for Vitality is that we operate what we call a shared value insurance model, where we try and create a virtuous circle of generating positive value for members and wider, I guess, society at large, as well as driving improved underwriting margins for ourselves and shareholders. That's what we're about. So over to Andrew.
Thank you. So Andrew Pedler from Liberty Specialty Markets. I head up our client relationship team and claims innovation globally. So predominantly that means I spend a lot of time with our customers and our brokers, making sure that our claims service delivers as it's supposed to, and also to use our claims team to differentiate ourselves from other insurers. From an innovation perspective, I'm responsible for looking after our data, or working with our data scientist teams, and also partnering externally with InsurTechs to improve our tech capabilities, with always the view of working more closely with our clients. Just quickly, just to set some of the framework for how I'm going to answer questions. Liberty Specialty Markets, if you don't know us, we are a global specialty insurer, writing both insurance and reinsurance products across 60 offices worldwide. We do write all the specialty lines, but in total we write over 50 different insurance products. And that means when we're talking about rethinking the next generation of customer, we have to be quite clear in terms of who we're talking about, because we have many different customers in many different areas. So looking forward to today, and especially being back in person. On to you.
Hi, I'm Wendy Williamson. I am a client delivery partner working for Capgemini. What that means in real terms is I work directly with insurers doing transformations, a lot of digital transformations at this point in time. And so that means that we look at the whole technology stack, that end-to-end life cycle, policy claims, everything. And we work with a lot of insurers, InsurTechs, because as part of those end-to-end solutions, we will tend to be integrating with with quite a number of those as part of those transformations.
And I'm Jeremy Owenson. I've been in the insurance space for a very long time. To give you an idea, I started off in a company called Eagle Star, and my job was to collect the rating cards from our competitors, type them onto a spreadsheet and use that to work out what our rates were going to be. I got the job because I could type, and that's because I learned to type on a typewriter rather than a computer. So that's my claim to fame. I've joined Luxoft 6 months ago. Luxoft is an analytics and engineering business. It's very big in banking and capital markets. But what we've discovered is that a lot of the things that we do in banking capital markets, particularly in the analytics space, are directly transferable across into the insurance sector. So I joined 6 months ago to help build out that insurance practice, to start taking those banking and capital markets tools and see how we can deploy them in the insurance space. So that's me.
Brilliant, thank you all. So I've got a bunch of questions that we're going to start with. If you want to ask questions a little bit later, there'll be plenty, so feel free to ask those and log those via the app, or we'll also be making time to do it the old-fashioned way. So thinking caps on for those questions that you want. I think coming back out of, for those of you that were in the panel before, looking at technology and how much has accelerated and changed during the pandemic, I think for me, one of the things that's really interesting is it's accelerated the digital and technology journey that a lot of companies and individuals have been on, and therefore, as a consumer, I now no longer benchmark products specific to the vertical that they're in. I look at all products, and therefore you have the likes of Amazon and these digital providers that are setting the benchmark. So I think this is going to be an interesting discussion for us all in terms of next generation is not only future customers, but also how our customers' needs are changing. So David, if I could start with you, I mean, obviously Vitality have got a great market presence. How do you create products that are innovative and are driven and respond to customer insight?
I mean, first thing I guess I would say is obviously Vitality is somewhat unique in its kind of approach to insurance. So I certainly wouldn't want to suggest that the way we approach it might necessarily work for everybody. But I mean, to share some insight into how we go about it. I mean, there's probably, I would say, maybe kind of 3 or 4 key kind of principles or key kind of elements to the approach. I think the first thing that's certainly very, very important from a Vitality point of view is that innovation, so product innovation, and putting the customer at the center of that innovation is part of our overall business strategy and our organizational culture. So from the top of the organization, there's an absolute commitment to a high cadence of product innovation. And because of the nature of our kind of business, I suppose, we have a proposition that's more purpose-driven. So, what we're trying to do is deliver a different kind of value to our customers. So in the context of health or life insurance, our purpose is to try and make people healthier. In the context of our car insurance, it's to try and help people to be better drivers. So those aren't traditional insurance kind of goals, if you like, but what they do is they give us a purpose that is there to drive innovation on behalf of the customer. And that in turn gives us the opportunity to create an organizational culture that galvanizes around those purposes. So that's kind of almost like a strategic and cultural sort of context. I think then from a more practical point of view, I guess the second principle is just commitment in practical terms. So accountability at an executive level for innovation, dedication of the right kind of resources and skills to the process, and an investment in those resources and skills. So we have dedicated R&D teams whose job is purely to look for those product innovation and market opportunities. And increasingly, I'd say, as part of that process, we've been through a bit of a transformation over the last probably 3 to 4 years, where customer experience and insight around customer experience is now as important a part of the R&D and innovation process as the product idea itself. I think you wind the clock back 3 or 4 years, people were dreaming up different sort of insurance mechanisms or different benefits or features for products, and that's not enough from our perspective anymore. You have to develop those concepts in parallel with how you're going to execute the experience in a brilliant way as well, and so that requires the right skill set. So a lot of CX, obviously digital experience design being actually, the way I would put it is we've infiltrated our R&D teams with the right skill sets from a customer insight and an experience design point of view. And then final quick point, I think, is just having the right tools to make that possible. So, good technology, both from a customer experience insight point of view. So we've got various platforms that help us get VOC insight, very rapidly, both online, offline, feed that into the process, have good mechanisms for ensuring that senior stakeholders get regular visibility of that insight, and then have the ability to iterate experiences once they're live. You never get this stuff right first time, as everyone will know. You've got to be able to respond to the feedback when you get stuff out in the market, and so having that kind of agile, having those kind of agile platforms that allow you to iterate is super critical as well. So I guess those are some of the kind of key insights from a vitality point of view.
Great, thank you. And obviously that's very frontward focused, understandably. Andy, I know from your perspective that as a specialist insurer, the claims process is also considered part of products. So how and where does the claims process factor in from a product innovation perspective?
I think the third thing to point out is, claims has always been part of the product. I think that particularly in a specialty area, we tend to get that confused, and we separate what the policy is, i.e. its wording, and it tells you what you're covered for and the premium that's afforded. And then we kind of treat claims separately. And I think there's a couple of reasons for that. One is a misunderstanding of terminology in terms of what the product is. And I think we're moving away from something that was just a pure indemnity risk transfer from the insurer to the insurer. And actually we're looking at a product which does a whole bunch of other things, like offers additional value-add services. So particularly, and I was interested to hear from you guys in terms of what you're doing, because that will continue to transfer into the specialty space. The other thing from tech and innovation, in my view, is it's made the claim service a lot more relevant, because you can then really easily differentiate between what is good claim service, what is an appropriate claim service, and what is not good. And the way we've done that is through advances in certain types of artificial intelligence, particularly natural language programming, where we can automate certain types of claims, particularly those low complexity, high frequency claims. And what that does is it allows you to sell the product in a different way. So a good example would be, say, earthquake insurance. If we can sell a product to cover you for earthquake that also pays out within 30 minutes, that's a much different sell to just selling earthquake insurance. So it makes you a lot more relevant, and we're only going to continue to see that more often. Parametric is a great idea, I think, which will explain kind of what I'm trying to get at between the difference of a policy and a product. You talk about parametric insurance, and that is innovative in itself, right? You've changed a policy from an indemnity-based policy to something else, something that responds to an external trigger. But if you tried to sell that without a claim service that was automated, i.e. you say, okay, we will cover you for your crop, your whatever you might be growing, and we'll cover you for a lack of rainfall. If in the event there was a lack of rainfall, you then required the insured to find a data set to prove that to you, rather than holding the data set yourself, that's a difficult sell for a product, right? So actually what you're looking at is, what does that claims service do? What does the product do? And I think the more we can integrate tech capabilities into the product, we'll start to realise that actually claim service is not separate at all from the actual product that you're offering.
Thanks, Andy. Wendy, Jeremy, any views on innovation you wanted to add at this point?
The only thing I would kind of add to this is a recognition that the technology that insurers have has to be able to adapt to this. So a lot of the new products that are being brought to market don't necessarily fit a standard insurance platform. So we need to start thinking about what is the future platform, but we also need to think in terms of product development cycles, how do we get things out there quickly to marketplace? So where we've got new propositions and new products, how are you developing those on a proof of concept basis, getting them out to your customer, testing it with the expectation that you might have to dump it if it doesn't catch, or you have to industrialise it if it does catch. So having the full suite, I think, is important.
And I think in order to retain that ability to be quickly to the market, which is, can't be underestimated, a lot of the time when we're looking at the technology and the end-to-end solution, we're spending a lot of time actually simplifying it. Simplifying how the technology is used, what the components are actually within those products. We find lots and lots of duplication, lots and lots of superfluous stuff when we actually start to go through, the legacy products, as it were, and shape up what the product looks for the future. When you get, typically we get told there's hundreds of products that we sell, but when you actually go into it and you actually look, you map it all out, actually there isn't, right? And when you actually then have that understanding of the product and how it works and how you sell it, then you can be much cleaner and simpler about your technology, about your product, and how you offer it to market.
Yeah, thank you. And Wendy, inevitably at the moment you can't have a conversation about customer experience or in this marketplace without talking about digitisation, automation, transformation. What's your view in terms of can you digitise and automate everything, or is there some stuff that's just too complicated, and how do you make those decisions, or how do you place your bets in the right way, I guess?
Well, I guess if we were talking about 2 years ago, some people might have said, oh, some things can't be sold digital. I think that would be a hard sell now, given the last 2 years that we have just been through. And I think it's also important when we talk about digital channels is to understand that actually we don't just have sort of say one digital channel. When we are launching products out, we have multiple digital channels that we're normally launching on. So that can, you know, that could be your normal web, that can be your self-service, it could be your affinity partner website that you've given them, your broker or your agent website. So in actual fact, there's multiple digital channels that are actually going on that we launch out to. So what we find is that when we're dealing with something more complex, it's not the case that something never touches digital. Actually, there's quite a high demand to mix across the digital channels, and where it's more complex, there will be that human interaction, but it's a value-add human interaction. You know, self-service is very popular as we've been rolling out, particularly at renewal, to be able to go in and do some things on those renewing policies, but then to have the interaction about the more complicated aspect of that. And that still gets you those benefits there. And it's a similar concept then when you look at claims, because even if you've got a very complicated claim, not every part of that claims process then has to be manually handled, right? And that isn't necessarily to the benefit of the customer either, right? Actually, if they can access some of that information digitally at their own convenience, that is a much better customer experience, you know, in that respect. And what we're spending quite a bit of, you know, time with our clients doing is actually harnessing data to work out, even in those more complex claims, where are the value add points, right? What interaction actually makes a difference in the outcome of the claim, or the fairness and consistency with the way that you deal with the claims. And we're looking at building those models in, so it's learning, and we've got decision engines there that are directing, yeah, this is what we should automate, and this is where it should be handed off. And we've even got some insurers that are being really radical and saying, look, we're going to start from the mindset of it's automate first, and you only take it off the automation route if there is a real value-add reason to hand it to a person.
I mean, I think it kind of depends a little bit how you define complexity. I think you kind of touched on it a bit earlier. I mean, I think consumer expectation certainly is now for more, let's just say, more sophisticated products, more kind of sort of flexible products where they can tailor benefits and features. You know, that is kind of inherently complex from a delivery point of view. But you know, I think the challenge is to demystify that and simplify it in the experience, right? So it kind of on the face, you know, something can look complex on paper, but you know, that's the challenge, you know. And I think I completely agree with Wendy about the kind of value point, which is, you know, I think one of the key things that we're trying to do there is rather think a bit less about when we're trying to say channel shift or, you know, move things digital in that sense, but look at the insight from the customer to see at what points in the experience are we either creating value with a human intervention or destroying value with a human intervention, and then use that as the sort of guide for where to deploy a kind of human interaction, you know. So, you know, it could be a point of complexity in the product. I think a lot of the kind of research now is talking about trust and empathy being, you know, one of those key determining criteria. So if you've got an experience or a moment in an experience where trust or empathy with the customer is super critical, then maybe that's a point at which you need to think about going, you know, into a sort of contact center environment, you know, or even demographics or preference, you know. So certain customers might just prefer to interact in a certain way, and you know, I think that might be a defining characteristic or defining criteria in when to push people online versus offline. So I think for me, it's about having the sort of tools to give you that insight around, what points in the experience you're either creating positive sentiment or negative sentiment, and then design experiences with that in mind.
I agree. You don't always have to have digital and automation together either. So say we look at a complex product, a directors and officers product, for example. You may not be able to automate yet the policy wording, and that's how, when I think of complexity, I think of complex clauses in insurance contracts, because they are hard to automate at the moment. But what you can do is you can still provide a digital experience for that customer or the risk manager. So you can give them online access, to what is happening with that claim at any one time, who they can speak to. So that's why we at Liberty have developed online portals to allow them to do that, because then it creates that digital experience. Even at the back end, nothing's being automated at the moment. I think you're going to expect that more. Our customers certainly are. I think the pandemic supercharged that kind of trend, where that expectation is to be able to see things in real time. Everyone can now track their dominoes when it's outside their door and expectantly wait for it to get to their door. Let's not get confused that those risk managers who are in high profile roles, they still have the same personal line services at home. And therefore they still have that same expectation to be able to see what's happening with their claim, regardless of its complexity, in real time. I think that the more the market comes around to that acceptance that you don't actually have to digitalize and automate everything, you can just automate the bits and digitalize the elements that really provide that improved customer service.
And Jeremy, from your perspective, obviously with the conversation of digital versus people, what's your view on the balance between digital versus human interaction, and what does that then mean for insurance professionals in the future, do you think?
So interestingly, we talk a lot about machine learning. The term AI and machine learning are often interchangeable, but machine learning is basically learning from a human intervening in the process that the machine doesn't understand. So I think that is going to play a bigger influence as technology gets better. So as the machines are understanding the process by determining a claim or determining the choice around selecting a product, the human intervention will help keep the machine on track, but more and more will be done by machines rather than by humans. That doesn't alter the fact that there are certain circumstances and certain classes of customer that do want that human intervention. When we're getting into injury claims as an example, you don't want a machine just saying we're not going to pay your claim, because you want somebody to be empathetic and understanding. So it's about getting the right balance between automating the tasks that provide better service, reduce cost, and provide a better customer experience, but retaining people for the tasks that people are best to deal with.
So do you think what does the workforce look like in the future? That feels like a different workforce for the insurance professional versus what the markets historically had.
This is one of the reasons why I've switched more to analytics. I never really understood why insurance is analytics. At the end of the day, rating, even if I've just got all those paper rate cards, is somebody's doing some analytics in there. I think that the claims departments are going to start recruiting more and more data analysts. Rating and pricing departments are going to have more data analysts. Fraud is going to be led by data scientists, not necessarily by fraud investigators. So it's a bit late for me, but if I was going into this career 20, 30 years ago, I would be concentrating on understanding data, because that is definitely the future.
Yeah, I think I'd add to that. I think from a contact centre point of view, I think one of the things, it might be a gradual change, but I think ultimately potentially quite profound, the skill set needed to support that human intervention over the telephone, I think, is going to change considerably from, we've been through that process of, enabling quite transactional contact centre interactions, and I think increasingly those simple transactions will be taken out of the contact centre, and it'll be you'll need individuals have a much broader knowledge of the overall products and services that you offer, and have a skill set to handle lots of kind of non-standard, multifaceted kind of queries. And I think that's going to be quite a significant change in how we approach resourcing for those kind of business models.
I think we need to play, as humans, we need to play in the areas where artificial intelligence doesn't do it so well. So those areas of nuance, the grey areas, the empathy, it's just not good enough at the moment. So we can really play in that area. The other slight bit I wanted to point out, because I always try and see if I can disagree with people on the panel to make it more exciting. I don't really. But the only bit that I disagree with a lot of people when they say that claims handlers are going to need to have more tech skills, data skills, analytical skills than ever before. I'm not necessarily sure that's true, because what we usually see with the advent of new technology is people specialise into different areas, and they do that because things get more complex. But I can run a pivot table, I can write a macro, I can't write code. Now, I didn't need to write code to do that role previously, but now you do. That would take me a long time to learn. So actually what I think we'll see is a split of a claims department, a traditional claims department, into your operational side, your technical, analytical, and then your client facing. Whereas I think even within now or in the last kind of 5 years, we've expected our claims handlers to be a little bit of everything. And I think we'll see more of a divergence of that skill set as we go forward. Just kind of not really disagreeing, but taking it down a little different way.
I think what people don't want to do when they phone up then is get to the end of that and think, well, why couldn't I just have accessed that online, you know? And that, you know, that's where it has to be different. And if you've gone to the trouble of you know, making that phone call, it should be because it is something a little bit more complicated, nuanced, a scenario. You're not quite sure whether you've interpreted things correctly, whether you're covered. And therefore, that person, if the very first thing they do is say, I don't know, I'll have to go and ask somebody, that's not going to be a great experience. So I think that's where the kind of, you know, it can't just be somebody that's reading the script or ticking boxes, right? It really does need to be a different experience. It needs to be worth the call, right?
So we've got a couple of questions come in, which I'll come to. Inevitably, there's a big focus on claims. It's such a big part of the process. There's two questions. I'll kind of wrap them into one, actually. So the first question is, should improving the claims customer experience be the priority? And the second is it possible to automate a claims service process? Somebody mentioned in the previous panel, I know, about Lemonade, and they're kind of the poster child of automation, but interested in views from the panel of should the claims experience be a priority, and how realistic is it to automate the entire process?
I mean, I'll give you a good example, a practical example from the floods in 2007. And I was talking to a claims manager in an insurance company, and he said, it's really interesting. We've got customers, Cheltenham and Gloucestershire was particularly badly affected. And he said, we've got customers who have come to the end of their alternative accommodation because the alternative accommodation only lasted 12 months. And we haven't managed to dry out their properties. And they're kind of left hanging. And I said to them, well, why didn't you just write the house off? You know, you write a car off if it's beyond economic repair. Why are you letting this customer live or have a house that's a year old in an uninhabitable state? So I think we need to look at the claims process with a new light and come up with better ways to handle those sorts of claims going forward. And if in that circumstance, if the automatic tool said, actually, we work out that it's going to take more than 12 months to dry your house out and get you back in it, then give them a total loss settlement, pay the value of the house on day one, and let them get on with the rest of their lives.
I think so. I think we also need to be realistic in terms of, so I agree, yes, we should be focused on the claims experience and the customer experience, but we also have to be realistic about what we're selling and the market we're in. So even in your personal experience, when you buy insurance, for the most part, what people do is you look on your aggregator website, you don't buy the cheapest because you don't trust that, you go down until you recognise a brand that you know, and you assume the claim service will be okay. Now, the professionals in the room might look into it in a little bit more detail, but a lot of people don't. And again, in the specialist market, when you're looking to place a risk, the first question is coverage, price, capacity, maybe aggregate if it's a cat exposure, then claims comes after that. So I think what we need to do is look at, okay, if that is the case, how do we bring claims and other ancillary services, to your point earlier, to the forefront, to make it very much then it is actually part of the product. It's not just something that they might or may not happen afterwards. I think we as an industry need to get better at explaining that to the customer in terms of why it is so important and why we should really focus on the customer experience.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's probably fair in terms of acquisition, but I would say that in terms of customer retention, I mean, claims is like the ultimate moment of truth, right? That's when it all matters. So now, obviously, only a percentage of customers are going to go through that experience, but if you fail at the point at which that product matters most of all, you're not going to keep that customer. So I think for me, that's where the kind of real strategic focus on, continuous improvement or innovation in the claims journey comes through. Yes, there's opportunities potentially to drive more acquisition, but actually it's really about building that reputation and delivering on your promises for your customers. And I think from an automation point of view, I mean, I can kind of come back to what I was saying earlier. I think it's, should you automate or not? I mean, what you should do is be understanding, what your customers are looking for from that claims experience and where the opportunities are to enhance it, which may mean automation in some aspects, and it may not in others, but be kind of more insight and customer-led in those decisions, rather than, I think, historically the approach has been more of a kind of operational efficiency-led kind of mindset. And I think that's the kind of change we're going through now, is leveraging more of that customer insight to identify these kind of opportunities to deploy technology to help with the claims process.
Yeah, I mean, I think you always get to a point where, in terms of complete and utter end-to-end automation, there are only so many types of claims that are actually going to fit completely into that mould, right? And I don't know what the comment about Lemonade was, but I imagine it's the fact that it plateaued. It was very rapid how many were automatically settled, and then it plateaued for the last few years. And that's what you would kind of naturally expect. And we do a lot of the simple claims where, it's just one loss and it's very simple to do the fulfillment. We're pretty much there in terms of automating those end-to-end, really. It's where it's more complicated, and the fulfillment, it requires a number of third parties and scheduling and some of that scheduling shifts. So it becomes more complicated than actually the execution of the claim and what the different communications are. However, that said, when we look at an actual claims process, I do believe there's a lot of activities that occur in claims processes that really just don't add value, and you can't get into that and understand that properly unless you actually pull the data out of your system and see what you actually do with those claims. I see all these beautifully drawn up end-to-end claims processes, but how many actually follow that beautiful happy path? Probably not that many. And how do you know that happy path is the happy path? That there could be a better way of doing it. And actually, I think becoming much more data-driven, looking at the data and let the data telling you what was a good experience, because you can map out customer complaints and moments of delight from the customer as well. Sentiments can be mapped into that data, and I think that's where you can actually really get real value and add automation into the process, automate or even eliminate steps in the process where you're not going to change the outcome. Why would you continue that claim for much longer? Why wouldn't you find a quicker settlement? And that's what we, using data a lot for now, is to actually say, based on this pattern of behaviour, is anything we're going to do next going to change this outcome? If it's not, then we should be getting to settlement as quickly as possible.
I agree. I think the exciting part actually is the bits that you can automate rather than trying to automate everything.
Yeah.
So there are some instances, say, look at a large commercial property that's been flooded, for example. You may not wish to automate everything because there's going to be a lot of question around the value of things like the contents of the buildings and the actual claim. But what you can do, and what we try and do, is we have a relationship with a number of different providers for satellite and aerial imagery, for example. So in the event of a hurricane or a catastrophe, we'll have access quite quickly, within 24 hours, of an image of that property. Now, if we can see that there has been damage or there has been a flood, and we have a claim made of X amount, then we should be able to release an early interim payment to that customer. And that's an automation of part of the process, even though the rest isn't automated. But that's an example where we can tap into that wider insurance ecosystem of providers. We often say that we're not a tech company. We're experts in taking risk and managing risk. So if we can partner and make sure that actually now our product does a lot of different things, then we can automate bits that really matter. So we can get payment to the customer very quickly, ultimately in the end game, without someone having to make a claim at all. The full automation is maybe not something that we want to get to too soon, if ever.
Great. I'm going to pause there for a second and see if there's anybody that wants to ask any questions the old-fashioned way by putting a hand up. Oh, there's a couple. I think they've got some microphones. I think the lady at the front here was first. Oh.
Thank you. First of all, I thoroughly enjoyed it. It was quite insightful. The question I have is, when we think of the next generation of the customers with all the telemetrics data, with AI and IoT, what do you think of preventative measures for insurance companies? For example, health insurance, somebody who has cancer, rather than paying when the claim comes, maybe we can monitor his or her health. And same with flood or marine insurance with geometric geolocation and all those data. So just curious about it.
You don't work for Vitality, do you? I'll take that. I think it's a great point. I think that's obviously a big part of what we're trying to do with our proposition is be preventative, kind of with the holistic product as it exists. So help people to get and stay healthy, help people to be better drivers in the context of car insurance. And one of the things we're working on at the moment is, you picked up on an example there around cancer, and we're doing a lot of work at the moment looking at how we can leverage all the data insight we've got, putting together the kind of wellness data around people's lifestyle choices with the kind of assessment and screening data that we get as people, our customers use those parts of the product, and then the claims data that we have when people obviously have to make health insurance claims, stitching all those things together. And we do this obviously in around 30 different markets all over the world. So we've got a global data set, millions of life years that we can use to, in the not too distant future, start predicting where it's most valuable to offer a particular customer a certain intervention that is potentially going to be very beneficial in terms of their health. So a simple example would be, we're in a position now in the data to be able to identify when it is most valuable to offer a full health screen to an individual because they're in a particular risk category for cancer, for example. And obviously the next phase for us is to translate that data analytics into an experience and a proposition. And going right back to the start, that's the kind of thing that we're doing at Vitality from a product innovation perspective, which has that sort of customer kind of purpose and focus at the heart of it. And I think similarly we'll be, we're kind of much more recently into the car insurance marketplace, but it's the same principles are going to be applying there. We're going to be trawling through all the data we have from a telematics point of view to understand, what are the patterns in people's driving which lead to then accidents, and how can we use that insight within the product to help people be better drivers so that they are less likely to have those accidents. And I think it's a superb point and a real opportunity, not just for Vitality, but for lots of other insurers in different markets.
Thanks, David. I'm conscious of time, so the chap who's we stole the microphone from him.
Thanks very much. Apologies, it's another question for David. It does actually link, I think, a little bit to the question that was previously asked. You mentioned infiltrating R&D teams.
Yeah.
So what does a good R&D team look like? And if you're willing, what sort of data do you expect the R&D teams to provide you with?
What does a good R&D team look like?
Or even R&D model?
Yeah, I'm just scanning the room to make sure none of my colleagues are look, I think, so the model that we have is, we kind of, I think is quite unique. It's sort of difficult perhaps to sort of translate it to other businesses, but we have essentially we employ very, very smart people. We employ actuaries as our R&D function, but they're commercial people, as opposed to, like your classic sort of stereotypical kind of pensions. These guys are super smart and they have no other accountability other than to, kind of spend their time thinking of how to improve our propositions, how to disrupt new markets. But, it sounds a bit kind of simplistic, but super smart people with dedicated time and, a clear sort of empowered to come up with ideas that are going to disrupt marketplaces. And we just give, when we align our teams to our product verticals, and a combination of product verticals and our customer journey segment. So we break our customer life cycle up into acquisition, onboarding, servicing, etc. So we've got a bit of a matrix where you've got R&D leads for product verticals and customer journey segments. And so they're working with a group of stakeholders in those cells, if you like. And in terms of the data, mostly it's us providing them with data, actually. So we're kind of feeding those guys with a lot of data from our VOC platforms, from the performance of our products and experiences. So digital experience data, VOC data in terms of, kind of sentiment and kind of comments from customers. And then product engagement data, I suppose, is how I would describe it. So to what extent are our customers engaging with different features and benefits within the product suite? And we're really giving them that insight and allowing them to create based on that. I hope that answers the question.
Thank you. I'm very conscious of time. We've got literally 2 minutes left. So I think I'm going to ask each of the panel members one simple question. If we can try and keep it to like 30-second answers. And I think the question is, what's the one most important thing to impress the customer and make sure that we become more customer-centric in the future? Maybe if I just start with you, Jeremy, and we just work down the panel.
Sure, it's give them a good personalised digital experience. We have enough information about customer segmentation to be able to personalise our offering to them, and we just need to make sure that we can deliver on that.
Great, thank you. Wendy?
Wow, it's pretty much what I was. Yeah, it is about the relevant communications, right? And I think the one thing I'd add on to that is understanding that time is a commodity to people, and the last 2 years has only heightened that. So actually people want to be communicated in the most efficient way possible.
Great.
I think for me, this is where it really does come into from a claims perspective. The quickest way to lose a customer is to give them a poor claims experience. That's just an absolute fact. It's called a promise to pay, for a reason. So try and keep your promise. And if you can keep innovating as well to make that experience quicker, better, and more enjoyable for the customer, with them in mind, I think that's probably the most important thing.
Final word to you, David.
I think all those points, obviously, I agree with. I think the only other thing I guess I'd say is really work hard at coming up with brilliant products that deliver value to customers all the way through the life cycle, not leaving it till renewal or whatever it may be in the traditional kind of insurance model, and executing them brilliantly. You made the point at the start, the bar has been set high by companies outside of insurance, but that's what customer expectation is now. So come up with brilliant ideas and then execute them brilliantly as well.
Brilliant. We're out of time. I don't know about all of you, but that time flew by for me. I think we could have carried on for a bit, which is hopefully a sign of a good discussion. So if you could just join me in thanking the panellists, Jeremy, Wendy, and David.